Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I added the basic steel production and 3000 megawatts of coal power to my grid. I completed all the milestones in phase 2 and only have a few more parts to automate. However, I am going to do something that I have never done in all my playthroughs. Instead of hand feeding some machines to make the space elevator parts I need for this phase, I am actually going to build a factory for them. There are so many reasons not to do this, but I'm not in a rush and I want to try something new. In this video, I'm going to build small factories for smart plating and versatile framework. I plan on using some alternate recipes, so I'll need to do some hard drive hunting as well. Well, normally we'd be playing by flashlight by right about now, but now I can just go ahead and pause daytime right around noon. Glorious. I think there is another added benefit for people like me who aren't on the newest computer. The game isn't having to constantly recalculate the shadows. So I think later in the game, when there's a lot more stuff going on, pausing the time of day can kind of help my frame rate a little. Before I can get to building some factories, there's one major thing in the MAM I need to unlock, and for that, I need some quick wire. So here is my tiny little setup to do it. So I've just got my power tower that is connected all the way over there. But hey, this is only one power tower length away, so really not too bad. Let's run through it. So the miner Mark II is going to be underclocked, so it's only going to output 36 per minute. And that's because the smelter is going to take in 36 and it's going to produce 12. And then our constructor here is going to intake the 12 Caterium ingots, and that'll produce the 60 quick wire. I based this whole production chain off of one constructor. 60 is going to be plenty, and even though it stacks to 500, this will fill up in no time. Because I really just don't have a huge need for quick wire. But I also don't want to craft it myself. So let's just plug this up. And there's my 60 quick wire a minute. We take a look at the MAM and go to the Caterium tree. That's what I need for today. I have plenty of the reinforced iron plates, but I need to unlock the AI limiters. And thankfully the power switch isn't a requirement for anything else, so I can actually just ignore it. I'll probably unlock it at the very end, just so I can get the achievement for unlocking everything. But like I mentioned in the first episode of the series, I'm just not going to use them. Everything is just going to be on one grid. And that's just because of the small little hiccups I run into with hover packs later on in the game. Now I just need to craft the 10 AI limiters. Now I can unlock the Smart Splitter.
The Smart Splitter offers advanced settings that can improve conveyor belt logistics.
These are going to be very important for today. I'm going to go ahead and apologize now for those of you that are following along. We're going to jump right into the deep end with the load balancing. And the funny part is the Smart Splitter is actually the easy route for most of these. Instead of making a gigantic balancer, using the Smart Splitter to kind of manipulate the amounts using the belt speeds can make the load balancing a bit different and sometimes not so massive. Alright, let's go through the game plan for the first factory. Since these are going to be modular, each one is going to get its own tower. So first one up is the smart plating. I'm going to be making 4 a minute. And thankfully with the smart plating, you only need iron. And if I'm only making 4 a minute, I only need 93 ore. And as far as machines, it should be pretty easy. I'll go over why when we get over there, but I'm not going to overclock the smelters. However, some of the constructors and one of the assemblers, I'm going to go ahead and use power shards, just so I can cut down on the amount of buildings and make this whole thing nice and simple. Well, parts of it anyways. If we take a look at the map, I don't have radar towers yet. They're a little pricey to unlock this early, but I do love the radar towers, so eventually I'll get a whole bunch built. I only need 93 ore, and so with overclocking and Mark II miners, I only need 1 impure node. And so something just feels right about using an impure node for this and not wasting another one, even though there is no way I'm going to use all of the iron nodes. But it just feels right. I know that there are some impure nodes somewhere over here in this area. And so I'm going to lay down some power towers so that I can quickly get over there, because even though I do have the Explorer, with all the water, I would either have to, pave a road or whatnot. And I need to take power over there anyways. So I'll probably come up with a blueprint for the power towers, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I thought it would be appropriate to add an elevator so that I could get all the way to the bottom. Or really, let's be honest, I'm going to jump off and use my parachute if I want to get to the bottom. But this is a nice convenient way to get all the way up. But to get out there, we're going to use the power towers. Let me show you one of my favorite things to do is just jump and use the parachute. And then once you get right over your power line, you can hit right click and it's just going to hold it out, right? And then all you have to do is hit C to cut your parachute, and then you'll drop right on. And here we are. And this is the blueprint I've come up with. So this is actually in 2 pieces. This bottom part of the pillars are basically just an extension so that I could make these longer. It's just a 2x2 of the Fixit foundations and these are the 2-meter tall foundations. And then I just used concrete pillars on the outside, and then just the small frame pillars as kind of like a railing basically around the edges. And then on one side I have some ramps. And this way, when I'm out running around and collecting all of my nuts and berries, I can more easily just kind of run up here, run straight up onto the ladder, and then get onto ziplining. So the other cool thing about ziplines are they're a great way to go up. Although I placed this one in a horrible spot, really, and so it's kind of tricky because this kind of gets in the way. So I usually just hit right click ahead of time so that it'll just auto connect once I'm close enough. And then I just jump over here and it'll take me up. I used the blueprint, but I really didn't need to. I am not going to keep this. This part is definitely temporary. This part may even move. But the other ones to get out here are probably going to stay in place. There are probably going to be other towers where I build the base of it right on top of the miner, because it's nice and close, and depending on how many smelters or foundries or maybe the refineries or something, it may just be a convenient option. But since this one is already up here and it's on this ledge, I'm going to place a miner here, but then I'm going to build the tower probably right down there, because right past this big rock, let's see if the camera can go out far enough. So that's a nice huge gap, and when I use trains, they're probably going to go through there. And I'm only making 4 smart plating per minute now, but I can use that for the next phase because the smart plating is going to get used for the next space elevator part. So I'll be able to just attach a train station, and then from here I can really easily connect to whatever rail lines I have in the area. And let's be honest, it gives me an excuse to build another elevator. I'm going to place the miner and get the start of the foundations placed, and then we'll start building some machines. So it is a 6x6 area. Don't really think I'm going to need much more space. Honestly, with the amount of machines that I need, I could probably get away with an even smaller tower, but I do have some load balancing to do, and I don't want to make things overly cramped. There's going to be plenty of times where I misjudge the amount of space that I need and things will get cramped on their own. And it's a big world. We can use up a little bit more space. And like I said, I really wanted to use an elevator. This column of foundations was just to kind of get the spacing right, because this was as far out as I could go without having to build up and over this thing. So this is actually going to get all deleted, and I'm going to replace it with the lift. So the lift is going to run there, and this way, when you're in the elevator going up or down, you'll be able to see all of the iron. And yes, that little idea inspired like half of this build right there. I just thought it'd be really cool to be in the lift and be able to see all the iron ore going down. But I did learn some things about elevators, so let's go through it real quick. So it's connected to the power tower, which I just love. Being able to run the power up and down throughout your factory, just huge. I love it. So I love the elevator music. I think it's great. I also think it's really loud. If you go into the options and then the audio menu, we have so many different options in here, and some of these, like equipment, you can actually expand and change individual volume levels. So if you think the jetpack or hoverpack is too loud, or, you know, the chainsaw, I often turn down a whole lot. The boombox, I also usually turn down a whole lot. I've tried to find it, and I very well just could have scrolled right over it. But if you know of one that controls the elevator so I could just lower that volume just a touch, that would be so nice. There is a search bar, but nothing for elevator, personal elevator. But feel free to leave in the comments if you know which one affects the elevator here. As you can see, I obviously made it way too tall. And I did that on purpose. So if I copy the elevator and I hit E, I can switch to the elevator floor stop, and you can add a floor. So what I thought I would be able to do is just add the stop here. And then I thought I'd be able to just delete the top section, because now that I have a floor here and there's a floor there, I thought it would cut it in half, like when you put a splitter on a belt, it cuts it in half. I kind of thought that's what would happen with the personal elevator, but it doesn't. The only option I have, if I highlight it, is to delete the entire thing. So since I made it too tall, that is kind of what I have to do. So we're going to replace it now. But first I need my handy ladder so I can get all the way up there. Alright, so we take our personal elevator, and I want it facing this way. So it's going to face this way on this floor. So we click it once, and then since that's kind of hard to judge and get just at the right, and because I don't want to get the height wrong, I'm just going to take my ladder all the way up here so we can make sure it's right. And now I can rotate this floor around, and we can make sure, yep, right there. Except for I light, that's actually not the right height. Now this is the right height. I added a 3-meter gap, because like I said, this is all going to get deleted. And then probably, yeah, right in the center of this foundation is where the lift will go in. So that's just enough space right here. And what I'll most likely do is probably swap these out for walkways. I'll probably have walkways coming from the elevator. That makes a little bit more sense. And then this space right here is 4 meters, so I can put whatever walls or windows I want. And then this guy. So if you saw my last playthrough, I had quite a big housing for my miners, and I liked the idea of it because it gave me a space to do any of the load balancing that I needed to. But honestly, I didn't use that much space in 90% of them, I would say. And so they felt just kind of big and clunky, but I still liked the idea. Look, there's absolutely nothing wrong if you just want to have a miner on top of some foundations. There's absolutely nothing wrong with just throwing the miner on the node itself and then just working from there. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. But for me, I kind of like the look of putting a housing on the miners. I don't really know why. I can't really explain it. I just think it's fun. So let me show you how I did it. So I'm going to hold down Control and get this attached to the world grid, which just so happens to be, hey, the same height as these. So all I need is 2, I think, really. And then I'm going to grab my miner. All I'm trying to do is get the height lined up with the miner. And then with the scroll wheel, I'm going to make sure that it's aligned in the direction that I want. So for this, I want it to go this way. And the main reason is I'm going to want this to make a 90-degree turn to go back onto the world grid. Because even though this right here is the world grid, we are quickly going to go off of it. So I'm going to go ahead and place my miner. So the height and the direction are aligned with the world grid. Now what I'm going to do is grab the beam. Oh, the glorious beam. You can do so many cool things in this game with the painted beam. And that's the key to this right here. I think you can use other things like the road barrier as well, but the painted beam just gives you a lot of flexibility because I can kind of stretch it out to be whatever length I want, and it can make it a little bit easier to delete later on. Okay, so to do that, I am taking the beam and I'm holding down Control, and that will snap to the miner here. Sometimes it'll be scrolled to the side, and really it doesn't matter. You can scroll it to either way, you just want it to be aligned in the same direction. So it should turn blue, I think. And then you want it to snap right in the very center. And you're going to place it, and then sometimes it's going to snap here, and then sometimes it's going to snap out here. it really doesn't matter where it snaps. Just drag it out to whatever direction. And now what I'm going to do is grab a foundation. Now, foundations and beams are interesting because the very center of the foundation will snap to the beam. And so we can do some really cool things with that. I'm going to let it snap to this side of the beam, and I'm going to press H to lock it in place. If I hit page down twice, it is now lined up, and we are now back onto the world grid as far as the height goes. As far as these directions, we are not on the world grid at all. But the height and the angle are both on the world grid, which are the important parts. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to nudge it to right here. So it's basically 1 meter past. This would be completely lined up with the miner. I am going to have it overhang by 1 meter. I'm going to place 1, and then I'm going to drag this back 4. And I'm going to go ahead and place those. And now I am going to delete these first 3 and the beam. And now I have 2 blueprints that I am going to use for this. So the first one is really simple. It's just some foundations. And so what I like to do is find the arrow, which is right here. And we want to line that up with the center of this foundation. And the fact that it's lifted up so much higher does not matter because now we have vertical nudging. So once I lock it in place, I can now hit page down 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And this is a 3x4 foundation. Go ahead and place it. And now patterns are free in 1.0. No more flower petals. Oh, how quickly I have forgotten how awful those things were. Oh, another great quality of life change. Thank you so much, Coffee Stain. I hated those things so much. So patterns are free, so have at 'em. So as you'll notice, because it so rarely ever lines up this way, a miner actually fits in a 2x1 space. I don't think a single node actually lines up this naturally. So if you didn't know this, I have a lot of hours in this game, and until I decided to make this blueprint, I actually had no idea that it fit inside a 2x1 area. And then once I knew that, then designing the rest of the blueprint was pretty simple. And now I have my second blueprint. So as you can see, it just takes up this 2x1 area, so there won't be any clipping or anything. And yeah, let's go ahead and place it. So the easiest way is just put it in blueprint mode and rotate it so the gate hole is facing this way. And then it's going to be 2 meters off, so you just have to nudge it twice. And then that's it. This is using some Fixit walls, some ramped walls, the tilted walls, the panel windows, and then I went with the chrome paint job with the painted beams. And then I have a double wall outlet here. So you do have to come in on the inside, and it's a little tight, so that's the one kind of bummer. And you'll have to connect the miner to this. And then from out here, it's a little bit easier. You can connect the power from anywhere. Now, chances are on this side, I am probably going to move that connection to this side because it would probably make a little bit more sense. And then I'm going to be able to get the power from my elevator. So this power tower is just going to get deleted, because now I can just run the power from here, and I think that'll look much cleaner. And yes, I'm absolutely going to share these. So I'm going to create a new folder. It'll be, I guess, like Satisfactory 1.1 playthrough or something. So I'm going to try to upload a couple more saves than I did in the past. And I think good spots to do it would be after I complete each phase. By the time this video is out, there should be a couple things in there. There'll be the phase 1 save, and there'll just be a couple blueprints that I've made so far. Now, one of the things I do really like about the Fixit walls is they show colors really well. But instead of having to recolor it depending on which node it's on every single time I place one of these, I just made a different version for iron, copper, caterium, and so on. And the only difference is they're different colors. But it saves me a little bit of time having to repaint them each time I place a new miner. Alright, and here is the challenge with doing it this way. These are on the world grid. These are at least aligned, so I don't have to worry about them being at like a weird angle or anything. But it's kind of a weird gap, so even if I hold control and nudge, it's not quite a half a nudge. You know, that would be 1 full meter. This is the half a meter. So it's just a little bit off, right? So there's probably a number of different ways, and I'm probably going to have to experiment with a number of different ones. But let's see, if I nudge it, Well, that's close, but not quite there. So you can just place ones here. And because the asphalt has a pretty consistent texture on top, you don't get that same weird Z-fighting as I would if I used any of the other foundation types. But I do still end up with this over here. And so thankfully it's really small. And so I think there's probably a good chance I could just use walls to kind of cover it up. And that kind of makes up for it, right? Because the walls are surprisingly thick. So now over here, it's like right up against the wall instead of it being like halfway on. So I think that's probably going to be the best way to kind of merge those things when they're that small of a distance. I'll probably just have to use a wall instead of just leaving it as plain concrete. But I don't really mind. And this way you can get it just centered directly on the miner. But I'm sure in other parts of the world, that's going to be a little bit more complicated. All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. I just used a whole bunch of pieces that I do not have unlocked. And that does feel like cheating. And that's because early on in the game, I mean, I guess I kind of do. I have another save file that has all the advanced game settings turned on so that I can just use fly mode and no build cost, no electricity. I don't mind not having fly mode in the regular game, but if I'm really going to spend the time making some detailed blueprints, having the fly mode just makes life so much easier. So I guess it is kind of cheating because you can easily just take blueprints from one save to another, much like you can do with any of the blueprints I share. But as you can see, if we come over here to walls, I have unlocked the gate holes, but I don't have any of those ramped walls or anything. And so if I try, I actually can't copy this. It won't let me because I don't have it. Same with the windows. But if it's in a blueprint, it will let you build it if you have the materials. At the end of the day, it's a game. Play it however you want. But that does feel like a bit too much of a stretch. So let's go ahead and fix that. Alright, let's just start syncing some of these extras that I have, because I should have a whole lot of these. So let's clean up my inventory and grab a few more stacks, because I think a whole bunch of these machines are shut off. So I should be able to just come over here and, yeah, like all those modular frames. Oh, look at all that. Let's just grab as much as we can and dump it in there. While I was watching all of my hard work getting turned into coupons, I thought the smart thing might be to take a look at the wiki and see what these things are actually worth. Because obviously things like wire and iron plate, not going to give me a whole lot of points very quickly. But if we take a look at some of these, modular frames, pretty good at 408. Rotors, surprisingly low at only 140. Reinforced iron plates, only 120. Steel beams, only 64. Then I remembered the good old encased industrial beams. 528, and they stack twice as high as the modular frames. So I grabbed a whole bunch of those, and let's see what that gets me. Editor Moo here. The Moo that was recording forgot to unmute his mic, but I'm just rambling on about all the pieces that I need. So if you're wondering why I'm wiggling my mouse randomly, I'm just animatedly talking about some part I'm missing. Just enough coupons. And now I have some extras, because I'm sure that won't be the last time that I put parts in a blueprint that I don't actually have unlocked yet. I don't actually mind. It kind of forces me to stop what I'm doing and get some things unlocked. So it's one of the few times where I left things up to the future me and I don't actually mind. We are back on site and about to build the smelters. But before we do that, let me show you the elevator. I went ahead and placed the lift there, like I said, and that is just coming underneath, and that's why this whole thing was set up like that, as the belt will run underneath. Our access to the elevator will be up on top, and then you've got the view of it as you go up or down. So we've just got the fix-it walls to cover up the foundations, and then windows up here so you can see the iron moving along, and then our walkway right on top. Originally, I was thinking of using glass foundations so that you could see the belt while you were walking on top of it, but that's another 10 coupons, so we're going to put that one off for a little bit later. And when I'm ready to start this factory, all I need to do is connect a power line from the elevator to this power pole. Let's start building the factory. So I'm going to place 4 smelters, and the reason I'm not going to overclock these ones, but I am for a whole bunch of the other things, is I just don't need to. These were always going to take up one whole floor because of all the load balancing I'm about to do out here. And the load balancing between 2 or 4 is, well, not really much different. It's pretty easy. Whereas on the other floors, it'll save a little bit of space. But if you wanted to overclock them, by all means. So I am going to get these lined up right in the center. So I'm going to give myself 2 full foundations here on the back to do the load balancing there. And then we'll have just shy of 3 foundations over here to do all the load balancing. Alright, so we need 4 in total. But first I'm going to go ahead and place 1 and select the recipe. I need 93 across 4 machines. So they'll be underclocked to 23 1/4. And now when I copy this, it'll copy the recipe with it. And I'm going to place these just right in the middle of each of these foundations. And they're centered, so there's just 1 extra foundation on either side. And with them spaced like that, I'll be able to place a splitter right in the middle of each of those 2. And then in the middle of those 2. And then in the very center, just got to make sure that these are basically just all lined up. Yep. That can go there. So 93 is going to get plugged into there, and that's going to get split in half. And then that will get split in half one more time. And there's the easy part. Now this is where everything gets interesting. I'm sorry. Alright, so to group everything together, I am just going to use a nice simple manifold. Then we need to use Mark II for these belts because we'll have 93. Actually, I changed my mind. This merger is going to face this way. Mark I from the machine, Mark II from here. Out of here, I'll have 93 ingots. Taking a look at the spreadsheet, you can see that the iron ingots are going to 3 different places. 20 will go to iron rods, 36 to iron plates, and 37 to cast screws. And it's that 37 that really makes things complicated. Because I think the challenge is fun, and I like the way the belts look. Let's go through the load balancing. Now, trying to go directly from 93 into splitting it those 3 ways would be really hard, and I just don't want to even think about how you would do that. So when dealing with a problem like this, I try to look for a couple different things. If there's one number that's just going to be easier to split off than the others, and then you can just split that one off right away, and now you just have a new math problem, and maybe the ratios are easier from there. Unfortunately, since our total is 93, that's probably not going to happen. And so this is where I'm going to use a smart splitter. The alternative way would be to create a 32-way split, and then you're just going to loop back one of them, and then you could basically have a 1 to 31, which would then let you create any number. And so doing the bigger load balance really wouldn't be too hard, because if you split this in thirds, you'd have 31 and 31. And then you'd be able to split it up between the 20 and then the group up the extra for the 36 and the 37. And if that sounds complicated, it's probably just because that's me explaining it. It's not too bad, but I think the smart splitter is going to be just a little bit easier. So for those of you following along, I hope this is easier to follow, but you'll have to let me know. So this is where we're going to use the smart splitter. So I'm going to place this right on the edge of that foundation, because where I can, I'm going to try to give at least 1 meter gap in between mergers and splitters. Because if you're relying on using all 3 outputs of the splitter to make your load balancing work, it's just a whole lot easier if you can actually see the belts connecting to all 3 of those outputs. When you end up with a huge load balancer and everything is kind of smashed in together, it just can be really hard to diagnose if anything's wrong. And honestly, I just kind of like seeing everything move around, so I kind of like seeing the belts. So I try to avoid that where I can. And hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to follow for you as well. Alright, so we start with 93 going into the smart splitter. When we open up the smart splitter, we've got all of our different options. And you can do all sorts of neat things with the logistics and being able to use sushi belts, where you have multiple different types of items on a belt. You'll almost always have to use a smart splitter at some point so that you can kind of separate them. And there's a whole bunch of other cool tricks you can do with these. For this, I am primarily just going to be using the any function, which is how a normal splitter functions, as all three of those are set to any. And then I'm also going to take advantage of the overflow. And that's what I'm going to set the center output for. The right one is what I'm going to set for any. By doing it this way, it basically makes this the priority. And if this belt gets too full, then it'll send it to the center output. And the cool thing with this is what I can do is if I put a Mark 1 belt here, I have 93 coming in here. I can only fit 60 on a Mark 1 belt. So once this belt is full, it's going to send my other 33 on the overflow. Now, one thing to keep in mind is belt speeds can make a difference here. In the past, what I would often have to do is make a small section, Mark 1, and then the immediate section out of the Smart Splitter, a higher speed belt. And the reason for it is the Smart Splitters and mergers have an internal buffer of about 4 or 5 items, I believe. And that helps when belts aren't completely full, because I only have 93 on here, but the belt will move at 120 items per minute, meaning you're going to have gaps every once in a while. Thankfully, with 4 smelters, it's going to be fairly consistent, and the gaps will be pretty evenly spaced out. Later on in the video, I'm going to show you an example of where this actually makes a difference, so I'm not going to focus on this too much. Thankfully, right here, because 93 is close enough to 120, and this has a big enough buffer of items, this won't be an issue. I'm just going to be able to use Mark 1. No problem here. But just remember this when we get to the next factory. Alright, so that's going to be 60 right here, and 33 is going to come out here. And what I'm going to do is take a merger, and that's going to go right on the center of these two foundations. And that's where the 33 is going to go. So it was a bit of trial and error to get all the spacing, so thankfully we can just kind of skip ahead to where I know the spacing is. So this 60 line is going to get plugged into a splitter, and that splitter is going to be right on the corner of those 4 foundations. Alright, so if we delete that, let's plug that straight into there. Okay, now because of the smart splitter, we can count on exactly 60 items being on this belt. And now we can do some load balancing with 60, which is a much easier number to work with than 93. Alright, so if I split this 3 different ways, alright, and we can go ahead and just place a merger here, and then we can take one more merger, and that's going to go that way. So this right here is going to be 20. So we're going to take 60, there's 20, and there's 20. And now with this 20, we're going to do a little bit of load balancing. We're going to do a 5-way split. Because the goal right here is to take 4 out of here and join it up with that 33. Because 33 plus 4 will give me my 37, which is the weird number to work with. Then I can split it between 20 and 36. And because those are both even, that's got to be much easier, right? So we're going to go ahead and place a merger here. And then with the 5-way split, you place one more splitter. So going from here to here, since we're dealing with 20, we can do all Mark 1 belts basically. And then from the merger into the first splitter. Now the first splitter is the one that splits it in half. So you're going to have 3/5 on one side, and then you're going to have 2/5 and the part that loops back, right? So I really only need 1/5. So that means the side that has the 3/5 can just go straight into a merger, which will be that side right there. And we can go ahead and connect that merger to that merger. And so now we just need one more splitter. And so that's going to go just one more meter in front of that one, which should give it, yep, perfect. Got the spacing right. One more meter there. All right, so that was the 3/5. So this goes into this splitter. And now I need to use all 3 outputs because one of them needs to loop back to the initial merger. One of them is going to go into this merger, and that's our 4 right there. And then the last 5th will go into this merger and get regrouped up with everything. So now I've essentially taken out 4 out of this whole thing. And now we're regrouping everything back together, so we can take this one and bring it back here. So coming out of this one will be 56. And now I can split it between the 20 and the 36. Alright, so far not too bad. And this is where I'm starting to think I probably should have just done the load balancing the other way. Because I thought 20 and 36, those must be really easy. Didn't really think much of it. But no, that's 5/14 and 9/14. Which if we did it the same way we just did the 5-way split, we would split it 15, and then we would loop back one of them. But splitting it 15 also just doesn't sound great, right? We could split it 16 ways and loop back 2 of them, and that would still give me my even 14-way split. So I had no idea that Google even had this in the Google Drive. But we've got a really basic drawing program to use. If you have any suggestions for things that I could use other than this that would be much better and not look really bad, I just drew a circle and then added an S and tried to get it centered and then just copied and pasted the whole time. So the reason every S is off center, that's the reason why. But if you have any suggestions of a better program, please, I am all ears. Because doing this was actually really helpful. This right here is how you would do a 14-way split. So we start with the merger, go into the splitter, so on and so forth. And then this would be a really nice symmetrical way to lay it out, because you just have the very outside outputs on the last splitters that will loop back into the initial merger. But this right here is another version of the same thing. I'm still sending 2 back, because as you notice, I just cut off an entire splitter, because that whole splitter was just going to get split in half and be 2. So we can just cut that off, and the one output from the splitter before equals the same thing. And then we can just send that one line back into the merger. And here's the other thing that I can do. If we start from the right and we kind of group them together, the first 8 of them are basically one whole half of this whole thing. So I don't really need to build any of those splitters. From this very first splitter, I can just send it straight into a merger. And that would be 8 of the 9. So really, I only needed to build half of this thing. So having that little diagram really helped me figure out that this whole thing wasn't going to be nearly as big as I thought it was going to be. We're starting off with a merger, and it still has one free input, so we can just use this as that initial merger in the diagram. So that is going to go into a splitter. So initially this is going to be 54, but because it's going to end up with some of it being loop back, we do need to make this one a Mark II. This is the very first splitter. That means 1/2 is 8 of a 14 already. So I just don't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and place the second splitter. And so this one, if we take a look at the diagram, needs to get split in half. But if we look at it, those middle 3 splitters end up equaling 4. So I don't really need to split those off. We can just keep those grouped together. So why don't I just add a merger here? So we'll add that belt there. And I need to split this in half. So let's just take this side. So that right there will be 4/14. But I do need to use the other output. So we're going to place that one right here. Make sure that the input is facing this one. Alright. And so here is the third splitter. So this one needs to get split in half, but one of them is going back to the initial merger, which just happens to be lined up right here. So that part goes back to here. And I need to send this into a splitter, because I need one to go into this merger, and then one to get grouped up with that belt. Because that has 8/14, but I need it to be 9. So let's go ahead and just add another merger on top of this one. We can face it pointing out this way. Delete this belt. Go ahead and add a lift here. Alright, so there is our 8/14, 5/14. And then we're going to go ahead and add a splitter on top of this one right here. And then with the lift, plug that in. And so now we just need to split this in half. So obviously one of them can just go straight into there. And then the other one just goes into there. And just like that, I'll have 36 and 20. It wasn't that bad, right? So next thing I'm going to go unlock are just the smallest signs. Even just the 2 meters, so I can add just a small amount of text so that I can label them and I don't have to kind of work my way backwards and figure out which one is which. So we'll just say the big one is the one with the beam for right now, just in case I forget somehow. But I'm going to run back and unlock a couple signs, bring back some quartz, and then I'm going to label it. And so I'll just have a small sign, and this one will be 36, This one will be 20. And then I am going to add one next to this merger, because this right here is my 37. Just like that. So just a small 2-meter label sign. You could always delete them in the future once everything's up and running, but I think it's really useful. Especially with the throughput monitors now, I can always come back to a factory even if it's not working, and if I have labels, I can throw the throughput monitor on there, and if it's not matching up to what it's supposed to be, it's a pretty quick way to find out if my load balancer is working or not. And then this side, just so I'm not confused, I covered up the splitters here because I don't want to accidentally use them. That would screw everything up. And that way, hopefully it makes it a little bit more obvious that it's just the merger that I want to use. Alright, well now it's time for the tower to grow. And I promise, this was by far the most complicated part. Everything else about this is going to be a whole lot easier. And we're back. So I think most of these floors are going to be pretty similar. So they're only going to be, I think, 3 foundations tall because you really don't need a lot of space. And I really like these new roll-up gates. They are just so cool. And this is also probably going to be a consistent design trend. This is one of the things I kind of did with a lot of my factories in the last playthrough, was have kind of an elevated walkway. Because I really like showing off the belts, but being on the same level as all the belts can make navigating factories a huge pain. And so I certainly don't blame anybody for lifting everything up so that you actually have the floor to walk around. That's another great solution. I personally just like seeing everything move around on the belts, so I decided to just add walkways kind of all around the rooms, and then that way you can at least get a slightly more elevated look down at everything moving around. I went with hex frame windows, and I've already ran out of silica. But thankfully, I think I made a whole bunch in those constructors, and I didn't bring it all. So just going to need to run back so that I can finish all the windows eventually. But until we get to the much taller buildings, 3 foundations will fit pretty much all of the smelters, constructors, assemblers. So for a lot of the floors, I'll be able to keep them kind of short. And one of the things I really like about having shorter roofs is when you do the power on the ceiling, it doesn't look that out of place. If the ceiling is really tall compared to your smelters, then the wires can kind of stand out. But when it's this short, I think it works pretty well. Let's go ahead and call up our elevator. And now we can go up to stop 2. And I've got a new floor. And I've just realized that if I want to do things the same way I did down there, it means that I'm going to have a floor like this all the way around, actually. And this stop is actually going to need to be 1 taller. So thankfully the middle stops you can just delete and then we can replace. This one is actually going to need to go there. Alright, now stop 2 is at 16 meters. There we go. And this floor won't be as cramped, so I can actually just build this ahead of time. Which gives me something to work off of, which is kind of nice. Just a tiny bit of elevation can really help. Now I've got the walkway all the way around, makes things a little bit easier. Alright, now we're dealing with the constructors. So down below, the iron ingots are coming out. The 37 is right below me. And then the 36 and the 20 are over there. And I think I can do this with just 4 constructors out of the 6 I have listed there for some reason. So I think if I just give myself 2 foundations here, that will give me plenty of space for everything, basically. And they're 1 foundation each, so let's just place 4. Alright, so let's try to make things easy. And by doing that, I'm just going to delete this foundation so I can take a look underneath. Those mergers are right on the seam of the foundations. So I think if I place it right there, that should line up pretty nicely. And we can just use the Mark 1 lifts. And we need to hit R to reverse it. And so now it'll snap right to the merger. You want to make sure it's not the bottom one. Got to make sure it's the top one. And then from up here, we can go ahead and place the second half of the lift. And this is going to be the 36. And so for this one is aligned, well, in kind of a weird spot. So I'm going to place it here. And then even though this is going to look really funny, I can nudge it in place. And I can make sure that everything is right. Obviously, I am going to put a foundation back here, but it does make my life a little bit easier not having to run up and down. And we can get that connected, and go ahead and place that there. And now replace the foundation. And everything looks right. Okay, so I know this is the 20, and this one's the 36. The 20 is going to iron rods. And for that, I need a total of 20. So with one power shard, I can just use one machine. And now we can just plug that straight into there. Iron rods are done. The 36 are going to iron plates, and that's going to make a total of 24. So again, just one power shard. And here is our cast screws. So for this, I just need one splitter. So we'll go ahead and get that right in the middle. So this is going to be splitting the 37 in half. So let's see. So if we go to cast screws, for the screws, I need 148 across 2 machines. So that's 74 for each one. So thankfully, I only need one power shard. But unfortunately, the most you can get out of one machine is 125. So I can't get away with only using one. I need to use 2. And 18.5, that sounds about right. We've got 37 coming in here, divided by 2 machines, 18.5. The math checks out. I'm going to go ahead and get this one lined up, I guess with this. Let's go ahead and place that one there, and let's see, where is... Oh, I fell. So we can go ahead and just bring this down. And connect it there. And replace our floor. Now I can take my elevator back upstairs. I can place my Mark 1 lift. And the belt. And so that's all of the inputs fed. Oh, let's go ahead and put that one in straight mode. And there's that one. Alright, so the last bit of load balancing. I have 148. 100 are being used for rotors. And the other 48 are being used for the reinforced iron plates. Now, unfortunately, 74 isn't the easiest to work with. And 48 over 74 isn't necessarily the nicest fraction to work with. You can reduce it down to 24 over 37, which really isn't great. 37 is not a good number to work with. 38, still not a good number to work with. 39, that's not a good one either. So you'd be looking at doing like a 40-way split and looping 3 of those back. You know what, that just doesn't sound fun. So we're going to go ahead and use the smart splitter trick again. So we're going to place a smart splitter on this side, and then a merger on this side, but I'm going to spin it sideways, because I'm going to end up needing that last output. So we've got 74 going into here, 74 going into here. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, and I'm going to split off 60, because if I divide 60 by 5, that's 12. So 4/5 of 60 is going to give me my 48. And that is a whole lot easier to work with than any 40-way split. So remember when I said that sometimes the belt speed made a difference and that it was a different factory? Well, I lied. It was actually just this floor. It's just that it took me so long to explain everything on the first floor, I thought it was going to be a whole nother factory. Just one factory blends together sometimes. So normally you would place the merger right here, because I want to use the smart splitter and I'm going to split off 60 and then the overflow is going to go that way, right? So you would have this any and this overflow. But here's the problem, and it's actually this belt right here. This belt only has 74 items on there, but it's traveling at a speed of 120. So that means it's only 62% full, meaning we're going to get some decent sized gaps on this belt. And the biggest reason for that is because this cycles every 24 seconds, and then we get 20 screws at a time. But now because the belt speed is so much faster than what we're making, when it gets to the smart splitter, what's going to happen is this belt is only going to be able to take the 60 per minute, but because this belt travels twice as fast, some of those are just going to end up going onto the overflow, because this is going to be limited to the 60 items per minute, but they come out in big batches, and then there's nothing, and then you get another big batch. So this setup with the smart splitter isn't going to work like it did downstairs. So instead, I'm still going to use the same merger, but instead of using this output, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the one on the side. And I'm going to switch the very front facing one to none, just in case. So this is not how we're going to do it. this is. So what I'm going to do is I am going to place a small section of Mark 1 belt, and that's going to limit this whole thing. But with this piece of belt, I'm going to make this whole section Mark 2. The belt will be limited down by Mark 1 because only 60 items per minute will be able to enter this merger. But when all the screws come out, this faster belt will be able to make up for those weird gaps that I'm going to get. I will show it in action, and I think this is actually a really good example of why I do this from time to time. Alright, from here we just need to do our 5-way split. So 4/5 is going to go one way, 1/5 we're going to send on over here. Alright, so we'll space this out by the 1 meter. So we've got our first splitter, and this is going to split it in half, right? So 3/5 one way, 2/5 the other way. And I'm going to go ahead and just grab a merger, and we're just going to place that right there. So we can make this one is going to be the 3/5. So this one is the one that we actually need to split. I think this is going to be the one spot where I actually have to place them up next to each other. So we're going to place this splitter here, and then I'm going to make sure I place my belt so I don't forget. And the reason is one of these needs to get looped back into this merger to complete the 5-way split. And then the other one is going to go right here. And I think this is, yeah, that's as close as we're going to get. If I had it spaced out more, then we just get a weird bendy belt. And so that one will go there. And then the last one, because this has 3/5, this will make it the 4/5. So right here is my 48. And easiest way to do this is with the signs. You can just go to the one with all text. And then I personally just like to use white text because the white text on the black background just stands out. And now when I copy this sign and I run over to this side, it'll leave the layout and the coloring. So now all I need to do is change the text. Okay, so now all the load balancing for this factory is pretty much done. Now we're on easy mode. Let me go ahead and add on the 3rd floor and we'll place the assemblers. Onto the 3rd and final floor. I've still got quite a bit of decorating, but I like to leave most of that to the end. So let's get these machines placed. So for spacing, I'm just going to get them spaced out just a little bit so they're not just right up next to each other because, well, we've got the space. So here in the back, I'm going to need very little room, so I'm going to give myself much more space up here in the front. I'm going to have one assembler facing this way. Well, actually 2. The second one on this side is also going to be facing this way. We'll line that one up. Then the 3rd one that's on this side of it is going to be spun around. And that one... See, when you get them to line up like that, but it's backwards, it seems like it's always 1 meter off. That makes way more sense to line up. Yeah, much better. Okay, let's set some recipes. So this very first one is the reinforced iron plates. This one is using the small amount of screws. And I need 4 reinforced iron plates. And there's that 48 screws. And there's the 24 iron plates that I need. This next one is making the rotors. And this one I can leave at 100%. It's going to make 4. And then the last machine is making the smart plating. This one, I'm going to throw 2 power shards into it. And it's going to be overclocked to 200%, so it produces 4. So it takes 4 reinforced iron plates, 4 rotors. That's out 4 smart plating. So the belt work on this side is real nice and easy. We can just pull these right across. And there's that. So now I just need to get the inputs for these. But there's also one other thing, and I kind of want to work around this. So what I'm going to do is have a smart splitter, and it's going to go right here. Yep, so we got our 4 smart plating that's going to go into a smart splitter. And then that is going to go into a storage container, and I'm just going to nestle it up right next to my walkways so it's really easily accessible. Because from up here, now you'll easily be able to just look inside the storage container. And I'm going to have the priority go into the storage container. So we can set left to any, and then forward will be the overflow. And once that fills up, we are going to go ahead and send that into a sink. so the overflow will just end up getting sunk. 4 per minute isn't a lot, but it will add up. And later on, I want to put these onto a train and then use them in the next space elevator factory, because that just sounds fun. But there's no reason to just let the factory turn off. Sure, it's not a ton, but each one of these is worth 520. But once I get my 1,000, then it'll just be a nice steady stream of 2,000 sync points. Now with this in place, now I can kind of work around it. So we're going to place a lift here. That's probably where the screws are going to get plugged in. And then with this one, we can move this one out a little bit farther because, well, why not? We'll put this one right here. So like I said, I just like seeing everything on the belts moving around. And then with these ones, we can drag these all the way back here. Now one of these will need to be a Mark II because I need 100 screws. Only 20 rods, thankfully. And I think the rods are coming out of the one on the right. And then the plates are coming out of the one here on the left. So I think this one would be the Mark II since the screws are on that side of the floor. So this one can be a Mark I. And now I just need to go down here and make sure everything gets plugged up into the right spot. And unfortunately, some of them just won't play nice. Like, I'm not going to have this clip through there. So I'll probably just have that there. And then if that's there, that means I can go, I don't know, something like this. Plug that into there, and then that one into there. I might have to get a little bit creative, but this is the easy part. So I'm going to finish up the belt work, get everything connected to power, because I can basically just leave the miner unplugged, get everything else connected, and then once I plug that up, everything will come to life. So let me do that stuff and finish up the decorating, and we'll go on a quick little tour. Smart plating tower is ready to be turned on. I really like those honeycomb windows, and I'm sure I'll find places to use them, but I decided to switch them out for just the plain panel window. I just like the way these fit better. And the Fixit walls just look a little bit funny with certain colors. And I think black is one of them because these weird kind of spots in the middle just look kind of funny. But I decided, you know what, we're just going to leave it. It's kind of an ode to the beginning of the game where you pretty much only have Fixit foundations and walls. You use the painted beam to accent the windows, plus when you don't, the difference in materials between the Fixit wall and then the concrete walls kind of looks a little bit weird. The assemblers aren't too tall, but the sink and its little antenna sure is. But I didn't need to make the entire floor that tall, I really only needed to make this section. Plenty of these towers are going to end up as just, you know, gigantic rectangles that are all the same on all sides. So I figured I had an excuse to make a slanted roof, and so I used that excuse to make it look a little bit different. And in the middle, I just used some glass roofs. So I did have to go back and unlock those. But thankfully, those were only like 2 coupons. Each floor is now labeled, and I've got a little railing to take me from the elevator to the factory. I'm pretty happy with the way that it turned out. Alright, enough talk. Let's see it come to life. There it is! The first actually automated smart plating I've ever made, besides when I'm at the final phase of the game. How cool is that? Thankfully, the startup was real smooth. and everything is staying on at 100% pretty quickly. So that is 4 smart plating per minute. I need 1,000 at 4 a minute, 240 minutes. Yeah, a little over 4 hours, and this will be done. And if I waited for this to be the very last thing I built in the phase, then that would feel like a pretty long time. But thankfully, I have so many other things to build. I'll be syncing smart plating long before I actually complete phase 2. Everything is on and working at 100%, so I'm definitely not going to go back and change any of this because, well, it works. But as they say, hindsight is 20/20, and in doing the recordings and then editing, gives me extra time to do some reflecting on, did I make the right choice? And I'm still not really sure. But I just kept thinking about it, was this the right way to load balance this? So here's the schematic if you wanted to load balance them all just kind of straight away, going from the 93 to the 20, 36, and 37. It wasn't actually as bad as I thought it was, although I know it looks super busy. But you basically break it into 3, so you have 31, 31, and 31. And then with one of those, you're going to do a 32-way split and loop one of them back, which sounds awful, and that was the initial reason why I didn't do it. But that's just because, for whatever reason, I just wasn't thinking. 32 is a power of 2, making this super easy. So it's basically just a single line of splitters, and you just split it in half, split it in half, split it in half. And then with this, I'm going to create 20 out of the 16 and the 4, and then I'm going to use the other bits to complete the 36 and the 37. So I hope that kind of makes sense, and if this diagram looks like it would be easier to follow, I really hope that helps. The other thing I wanted to mention before we move on was this part up here. I was basically just overthinking it. The easiest way is just to continue this, even though this is off grid, right? And have the line that is on grid that's coming from the elevator just run into it basically. So as you can see, if I highlight this, it's just overlapping a little bit. So these right here are just slightly not lined up, but that's the beauty of asphalt. Well, the smart plating sure took way longer than I anticipated. So let's see if we can do the second tower just a little bit quicker. Alright, well, while I jump on this zip line, we can take a look at the spreadsheet. So in this tower, I'm going to be making steel beams and the versatile framework. Here's a snapshot of the spreadsheet. So we've got a few more machines to place, but the quantities for all the machines are all pretty low. And the reason I came all the way out here is I only need 150 coal and 165 iron ore. And I can get 150 out of an impure node. So just like the last tower, it just felt right to just sacrifice an impure node to this. Because I need 165, I will need at least a normal node, but honestly, I just don't see myself running out of iron. So that's okay. And that's all I'll need for this build. As you can see, I'm using quite a few alternate recipes. Once I placed all the power towers to this side of the desert, I ran over to a couple of the hard drives just south of here on my way back. And here we are. So if we take a look at the camera mode, we've got a bunch of coal nodes down here actually. So these two are impure, and then that one right there, and that one are both normal nodes. So I'm just going to use the closest impure node here. And then if we come to this side of the power tower, there's 2 iron nodes. Now these are both pure, but like I said, I don't think I'm going to run out of iron. So for today, I just need one of them. In the next video, I'll use the other one, but that's in the future. So with one node there and one node here, I think just right here in the middle is a good place for the tower. Now I can clear out the area the easy way using the good old nobelisks. So let me clear this stuff out and lay down some foundations, and then we'll get to building some machines. The foundations are placed, and I went with the same size. It's a 6x6 area. Because like you saw, I don't need a ton of machines, so I think this will be plenty of space, but not wasting too much. So I figured I would keep a similar build style for these two. Once I have everything unlocked, then we'll really try to start spicing it up, but for now we're going to keep these towers pretty simple. So the first floor, we want to take care of the iron ingots, and to do this I need 3 smelters. Since the iron is coming from right over here, I think it would be easiest if it plugs in on this side. So we'll have the inputs over here. And the load balancing is just going to be super easy. And we've got plenty of space. So let's just get this one right in the very center. So 1, 2, 3. Yep. So that's the center. And yeah, that looks good. Let's go ahead and set the recipe. All right, I'm back. 4th time is a charm. So one of the fun parts about playing with mods and being on the experimental branch is sometimes things get updated and then all of a sudden not everything plays nice. So I had to turn my mods off. I could open up the build menu for some reason and I could place the smelter, but as soon as I went to set the recipe, the game would crash. Or if I opened up like my inventory, the game would crash. I'm sure it'll get fixed soon, but it's not too bad. Let's go ahead and place a smelter here. And go ahead and get one on either side. So 3 smelters total. So I believe each one is going to need 2 power shards because we're going to do 165 across 3 machines. So 55 for each one. Load balancing on this side is real easy. We'll just place a splitter there. And each one of these can be Mark 1 because it's only going to be 55. We'll need to plug in a Mark 3 going this way. And we can go ahead and just set it. Just as a friendly reminder. You can build any of the things that are in the same subcategory, I guess. And so if you have the floor hole, you can easily get to the conveyor wall hole. And there you go. Or I guess even just the normal pole. The normal conveyor pole will get you to any of these two. So many shortcuts, and I forget about half of them all the time. Alright, so that will be a Mark III into there. And then on this side, let's go ahead and get them all grouped together. Place a merger here. And then from here, the iron ingots have actually a number of places to go. 150 are going to go to the steel ingots. 9 will go to the cast screws. And then 6 will go to the steel cast plate recipe. So for now, let's just work on 150, and then I'll group the other 2 as 15. Because that'll be easier to split up. And to do that, just going to use the good old smart splitter. 165 into the smart splitter. And then I'm going to place a splitter to the left. And because this belt isn't quite full, I'm going to do the same thing I did in the last factory, where I'm going to do one small section of Mark 1, so it's going to get limited down to the 60 per minute. But I'm just going to use a faster speed belt here to make sure that that stays full. So the priority, any, will be set to the left, center will be the overflow. And for the overflow, I'm going to take a merger, and I'm going to place it right here. So this needs to be Mark II belt, because this should be 105. Now that I have 60 going into this splitter, I just need one more splitter. So if we take 60 and split it in half, that would be 30, and that would be 30. And then from this 30, we'll split that one in half. So there's 15. And then there's the 15 that I need. And this is the 150 I need for the steel. Let's go ahead and jump ahead to the next floor. And now it has a second floor. I'm going to figure out which windows I want to use and whatnot later. I just want kind of the rough outline, get all the machines in place, and then I'll just do a little decorating later on. So the one thing I did change was this corner for the elevator. So instead of having the walkway go all the way to the corner, I just decided to build around it and use this corner for the elevator. And the cool thing about the elevators, let's go over there and I can show you. With the last factory, I built it way too tall and I couldn't make it any shorter, which is a bummer. But the neat thing is you can actually keep making them taller. So it's much easier just to build them too short and then you can kind of fix it from there. So when I go to build the next floor, I'm going to delete this in a second, but just for the example here. And I can add on just the elevator and make sure, so that would be the ground floor, which is that, and then I would go another 4, right? So it would be 12. Because of the markings, it makes it pretty easy to tell where it's in whole foundations. So that would be for the next floor. And then I just need to grab another elevator floor stop. And so adding on to the elevator, really easy and convenient. Trying to make it smaller, not so great. Because now the only option is to delete the whole thing, which is kind of a bummer. Thankfully, I know it's going to need another floor. Alright, so foundry time. The coal is coming from down there, which means it'll either plug in on this side or this side most likely. The iron ingots are coming up from this side, so it just makes sense to have the foundries facing that way. So I like lining up the inputs and outputs on something convenient. I may have to play with the spacing, but I think that looks good. Place that one right there in the center. And there we go. I just didn't want this input to end up under here, just to make things a little bit easier on myself. Alright, and then as far as the inputs go, it should be pretty easy. So I think this right here is the spacing that I want. So we're going to place that one there. And then with this one, I could place two of them and delete one, or now I can just nudge this up too. And now we can use good old Stubby. And thankfully, I just watched the dev stream this morning, and they did say the Stubby is staying alive. So thankfully, I was waiting to redo a lot of blueprints, because I didn't want to just bring them all over. It's more fun to just remake new ones. Try to make little changes and make things different, right? So any of your blueprints that have stubbies are still going to be broken. But once 1.1 officially releases, just remake those same blueprints, and you should be good to go. So thankfully, Stubby is alive and well. So you can use a splitter or a merger to force it to be the nice little, the squished lift, as Mikael called it. That one just doesn't roll off the tongue as much, so that's why I didn't call it a squished lift. I would get tongue-tied saying it too often. But you can also use either the stackable or a regular conveyor pole as well. So I like the stackable, just because then I don't have to mess with the height at all. Especially if you just leave it in default mode, then it's just one click. And then I just want to connect it to the top. And then at the bottom. And make sure we delete that. And then I should be able to get it nice and compact. We'll do the same thing on this side. And there's the inputs. And I'll worry about plugging these up, but I know that they're going to get plugged up right there. And these are both going to be Mark III because it's going to be 150 for each. Speaking of, we haven't set these recipes. Oh yeah. Hard drive scan complete. Hey, look at that. Solid steel ingot. Wow, that just so happens to be the one that I need. I always forget that it immediately takes you out of the menu. I usually try to cut it out, but let me tell you, I just stare up at the sky like every time I pick something because I think I'm staying in that menu and I'm gonna move my mouse, but instead I just stare straight up at the sky all of a sudden. Sorry about that. Alright, so now we can go ahead and pick our solid steel ingot. And since I already have all my numbers, I know that I'm going to be making 225 across 3 machines, but that definitely needs power shards. So we'll just throw them all in there. 225 divided by 3. Oh, we only need 1. There we go. Now we'll just copy and paste. And this is the major load balancing part of this factory. Steel is going to go to 3 different places. So the majority, 216 out of the 225, are going to be making steel beams. I need 3 ingots to go to steel rods, and then 6 ingots to go to the steel cast plates. Each one of these machines is making 75, and I need 9. So let's group up the 6 and the 3, because I can split that off later. That's easy. So 9 out of 75, 0.12, which is the same as 3/25. So that can't be too bad, right? We just need to do a 5-way split. So this needs to be Mark II, because that'll be 75. And then we do the 5-way split. So here's the first splitter, and that one's going to need to be Mark II. So let's go ahead and place a merger right here. And so let's just say this one right there is the 3/5. And so the other half is going to go here. And this is the one where we need to use all 3 outputs, because one of these needs to get looped back to the original merger. One of these 5ths I don't need at all, so we're going to send that off to the other 2. And you know what, in fact, let's go ahead and place this merger. This one is going to be placed in line with this and the machine. So that's 75 into there, that's 75 onto that side. We'll go ahead and just make that one a Mark II. So now I basically just did a 5-way split and grouped the rest of it with those 2. And so now I have 1/5 out of here, which would be 25. And so with this, we just need to do one more 5-way split. And that's where I can get my 3/25. So let's go ahead and place a merger up here. So we've got 25 going into there. And then because we're kind of running out of room, let's go ahead and just spin it around here. I'm going to place the first splitter right here. And we can just use a Mark 1. And so out of one of these is the 3/25ths that I need. And so let's just go ahead and say it's going to be this one. So now we need the other splitter. So we'll just plug that one up. And this one, it needs to get looped back to the first merger. But then I can go ahead and group up the other two. So let's go ahead and place this one, I think, right along this line. Yeah, because then it's in line with all of those. Perfect. So let's go ahead and place that one there. So here's 1/5, here's 1/5, and this right here is my 3/5. Put it right here. So that right there is 9. And this I want to get grouped up with everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my stackable, and if I go 1, 2, 3, 4 meters, I can connect it to the top. And once I get it the right way, I'll go ahead and attach to the splitter. And then this one I want to be facing inwards, so I can just use another merger. That's just nice and easy. Place it there, delete the merger, and now I can connect these two. There we go, good old default. And there's the load balancing. So now I have 150 in that merger and 9 coming out of that splitter right there. Let's go ahead and add the next floor. Floor number 3. Let's go. On this floor, I need 4 constructors. I think I'm going to have a good amount of space, so I'll give myself 2 foundations there and the 3 foundations in the front, just in case. Alright, so the very first one is going to be different. This is where I finally run into the issue where I don't have the recipe yet. Well, we're going to have to put a pin in this one. Let's go ahead and set these 3. These ones will be steel beams. I think each one will need 1 power shard. So let's see, I need 54 in total across 3 machines, 18 for each one. This constructor is going to be using the steel rod recipe. And so with only 3 steel ingots, I can make 12 iron rods per minute. It's pretty nice. The load balancing on this side is going to be super easy because we've just got the 3 constructors doing steel beams. So this is going to be the 216. I think earlier I said it was like 150. No, it's 216 coming out of here. And then the 9 is going to come up here. But for this one, what we're going to do is we're going to place a splitter. And so the 9 will get plugged into here. But this is only going to need 3. So I'm going to place a merger facing the opposite direction. So 9 will get plugged into there. And then if I use all 3 outputs here, it'll be 3 on each one. So 3 will go into here, and then 6 will come out of this merger and go on to the next floor. And those will get used in the steel cast plate recipe, which is another one I don't have. So I think it's that time I take a quick little break and go back to the hub. So because this episode is already going to be super long, we're going to cut out the hard drive hunting, but I did want to show you. I scanned another hard drive that I had. Normally I leave as many recipes in here as I can until that I need them. And that way it just takes out the less useful ones out of the pool, right? But this right here is just way too valuable before I go running around hunting for a hard drive. So I'm definitely picking this one. There's actually one really close to the smart plating factory that I just didn't go get for some reason. I just forgot about it. So I took my zip line over there, went and grabbed it. And one of the best parts about that one is it finally gave me enough computers to get the research done I really wanted to get done before I go on a longer trip to do hard drive hunting. And that's the manual depot uploader. This is such a game changer for when you go exploring, because it is really easy to fill up your inventory with just junk, especially with being able to dismantle the drop pods. And I like to dismantle them just because it's just an easy way for me to kind of clean it up and know that I've already taken it. And so I usually pick everything up and then you fill up your inventory so quickly. But now I can drop items in here, which is huge because like for motors or something, I'm not going to need these a whole lot. So I might as well just throw them in here. And it's super useful for all of the different remains and the slugs and that sort of a thing, just to give you some extra space in your inventory. So I highly recommend getting this upgrade done. And if you have enough Mercer Spheres and the SAM fluctuators, getting the first upgrade on both of these is pretty cheap and pretty worth it. Well, I have made it back. So I didn't go on too long of a trip. Probably spent a little over an hour. Got a nice little haul here. The main focus was just to get enough hard drives for right now. But I am certainly going to get as many coupons as I can out of this. While that works away, nope, still missing some. So we're going to keep on scanning. $360 DNA capsules. That's not bad. Let's see what it gets me. I think I already had 3, but now I'm up to 21. That's not bad. But I'm actually going to leave these in here, and I'll show you why. There's a fun little trick you can do. You can actually just place a sink anywhere, and you don't need to connect it to power. You can just build one, and with no power, it's not going to show you any details, but you can actually still hit print coupons. So this way, I can just leave them in here, and the next time I really need something from the awesome shop, I can just place a sink and the shop, and take care of it anywhere. Don't even need power. For all the temporary factories right around the hub, once those storage containers fill up, they basically just come to a stop. But I figured out of all these temporary factories, this one was probably worth the effort of adding some smart splitters and a sink. So this is just clearing out the extras right now, so the sink points are going to be a little bit higher, and then they'll drop down when it's just the steady amount. Minor detour that only lasted probably like 2 hours. We can get back to finishing this factory. And this is an interesting floor. We're going to have a little bit of everything here. And I don't think I'd need a ton of space on either side, so we're going to try to basically center everything. That is basically dead center of the floor. There's the constructor. Now I need a foundry. And let's go ahead and get the input lined up with the seam of the foundations. And that looks pretty centered. That looks good. And then last but not least, an assembler. But this one is going to be rotated the opposite direction. And we'll get the spacing somewhat even. That looks good. Alright, let's set some recipes. Got a few more hard drives, so now I can pick my steel cast plate recipe. And I only need 18. It is going to be underclocked to 40%. And I just need 6 of each. The constructor here is going to be doing the cast screws. And I need 36. So this needs 9 iron ingots. And then the assembler is going to be doing the reinforced iron plates. And this one is going to be underclocked to 3 per minute. And the numbers match. That means the belt work on this side is nice and easy. Just a little bit of work on this side. For the foundry, I need the iron ingots and the steel ingots. And then we know for the steel, it's going to be coming out of right there, so right in the middle of the foundation. Go ahead and just add a lift. I'll just have to go down there and connect that. Alright, and then for the iron ingots. So down below, we split off that 15. So 9 will go here, 6 will go here. You know what that means. It's time for everybody's favorite. It's time for another 5-way split. So it's going to start with a merger, and that's just going to go right in the corner of this foundation. And that should give me just enough space. So we go from the merger to a splitter. This is the very first splitter, which means we'll get 3 fists on one side, 2 fists on the other. So thankfully, we can line this up so it'll go straight into the constructor because this one needs the 3 fists, that one needs the 9. And then from here, I actually think I need to squeeze this one right next to him. Because then I'm going to take a merger and I want this one lined up with this one. And I think, yep, and to do that, it's going to need to be that far over. I'll place the merger here. Now go and connect both of these. So there's our 2 fists and send that right in. But I do need to use that last input. Oh, and I do need to make sure this is connected. So this one goes all the way back to that first merger. Now the 15 just needs to get plugged into either one of those inputs. Then there's the iron and the steel, which will make all the reinforced iron plates. Which means we're on to the last floor. Pretty good progress so far. And this last floor is the easiest out of all of them. I just need 2 assemblers. And so we're going to get them nice and spaced out. So let's line this one up here. And the other one will be flipped around. Let's set these last recipes. This first one is going to be doing modular frames at 100%. Second one is the versatile framework. This one will be underclocked, so it'll only be 4, and then we get nice even numbers. The 2 modular frames coming from the assembler right next to me, and then I just need to do a little bit of load balancing with the steel beams. So I can go ahead and just make that connection right there. And then the steel beams will come up from down below. And then same with these. So the reinforced iron plates should be basically just right below me. Yeah, just right here. And hey, look, it's all lined up. So I just need to add a lift and some belts, and that's the reinforced iron plates. And as far as the iron rods go, I think that was the one machine that I didn't have the recipe to place. I'm gonna have to fix a whole bunch of holes in my ceilings. So I finally got the steel rod recipe, and this one is gonna be underclocked to 25%. So I only need 12. Nice and efficient, and it's gonna use very little energy. So for the iron rods, since I want them on this side, I'll actually probably bring them to this corner. And I'll probably just run them up, probably right along there. And that gives me just enough room to get around here. And then we'll just go up to the appropriate floor. The corners are usually pretty safe places to run things up because the machines rarely get over to that spot. And it puts it nice and close to the catwalks, so you get a nice view of it. Alright, so for the load balancing for the steel beams, I want them to go to 2 different places. I'm making 54. 24 of them are going to the versatile framework. The other 30 are going to my storage. Smart plating was my first permanent factory. Then the first useful part that's going to have a permanent factory is going to be steel beams. At least that one kind of makes sense. I go through a lot of steel beams. So this load balancing is really easy. I could have overclocked these more and placed less machines, but having each one output 18 just makes my life easy. Because now I can just place a splitter right here, line that up right on the edge of the foundation. So we'll have 18 go into here. And then I'm going to go ahead and place mergers facing out on both sides, lined up with the other constructors. So that'll be 18 into that one, 18 into that one. And now I'm just going to split this one all 3 ways, because that'll give me 6 and 12. So here's my 30, and there's my 24. So now I just need to add some lifts and run that up, and these are going to go down. So now there's just a couple things to go from point A to point B, but that's all the really easy belt work. For the final products, I think I'm going to add basically a little housing out here. Eventually the plan is to have the storage and then the dimensional depots set, and then I'll never really have to come here. But it does take a little while to get the dimensional depots up to the point where you never have to go grab items. I at least want them to be easily accessible in each of these towers. And then I just need belt buses from the iron and the coal nodes, and then do a little bit of decorating. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward, and then we'll go on a quick tour, and we'll turn this thing on. There it is. So like I said, plenty of these factories are just going to be just giant rectangles, basically. So I decided to make the roof pointy. Let's start out here. So I used the blueprints like I did before, and so far, I'm pretty happy with them. I think I'd be okay with seeing a whole bunch of these covering a whole biome. So this one is picking up the iron, and then it's just going up here. So I've got my ladder to help me get up or down, and that's the iron going straight into the factory. Instead of using power towers, I decided to just run the power basically through the floor. Since the wall outlets will snap to the side of the modern railings, I just ran them there, and then since the cable dips down, it basically just hides the wires. Although in some spots to hide the wires completely, you have a whole bunch of those wall connections. In hindsight, probably wasn't the best idea because I'm probably going to want to have a power tower down here anyways. But for now, it's a nice clean look and, well, it works. So I've just got my ladders that help me get down, and we've just got a real simple bus to take the coal all the way up there. As far as this building goes, I decided to just go with the concrete walls, and then I went with the panel fix-it windows and made them chrome, so that there would be a decent amount of contrast. And then I just made this blueprint so that I could run these up the sides to just add a little extra to it. So these are real simple, it's just a whole bunch of beams. So I've got 3 of them in the back, and they're all facing kind of flat, and then the 2 in the front are angled. The back ones are just like this, and then the ones in the front I just rotated 3 times with the scroll wheel. and that just helps give it a little bit of extra depth and color. And here's the new front of the factory. The fans and the vents are cheap, so I had to use them. Only one iron plate and one copper sheet, so they really don't cost much. So I got rid of all those stairs, so I think this is a much better way to do it. We've got ramps on either side, and then easy way to get onto my power tower so I can zip line around. But once we come in here, this is my little storage area. So I just have one small one, and that is going to be for the versatile framework. And then I've got this one, which I made a blueprint. So it's just 3 industrial storage containers with a splitter and a smart splitter. And there's just enough room in here that I'll be able to add a dimensional depot on top of each one of these. So I can actually probably just add one now. Might as well. Steel beam is definitely one that I'm going to want, so we can just do that. 3-dimensional depots was good enough for just about everything. But if I ever needed to, I could just expand the roof, and I could stack up another 3, and I could easily just add some more lifts. So I've got my overflows set for both of them, so once the storage fills up, they'll go ahead and go into the sink. And because I didn't want to make this whole thing that tall just because of this, so I just used a whole bunch of frame walls to give it the space it needs. And then from here, we can just walk right into the tower. And this is pretty much everything that you've already seen, except for, so this is the versatile framework, and this will be the steel beams. The only real difference is the top floor. And you know what? Don't even mind that the mods are broken today, because I do love the northern lights. Alright, being distracted by the pretty lights. So I just added a line of the 4-meter sign and just made them glossy and turned up the intensity all the way on these. So nothing too crazy, but I think it adds a nice little touch. I'm gonna enjoy this night sky for a little bit longer. Once day rolls around, we'll get it powered on. The new day, time to turn on a new factory. For the iron, nice and easy. Gotta connect this to this. Now for the coal, I just need to run to the other side here. And I just need to connect the building to this one right here. And there we go. There they are, the first ones. Oh, how exciting. Automated so much earlier than I've ever done it before. Here we are back on the bottom floor. That is 4 versatile framework and 30 steel beams per minute. I'm pretty happy with it. The original plan was to do all 3 of the phase 2 space elevator parts today. But I do love to ramble on about load balancing, so the automated wiring tower will have to wait until the next video. Thankfully, I only need 100 of those to advance, and I have 1 or 2 more factories I would like to build before I do that. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.